Welcome to Where Parents Talk TV, and today we are joined by Lenore Skenazy, who is many things. We spoke to Lenore in 2011 about all kinds of things around the theme of the worried generation. Now, Lenore is the president of Let Grow, a not-for-profit organization promoting childhood resilience and independence. She's also the founder of Free Range Kids, the movement. Lenore became famous back in 2008 for a New York Sun column that she wrote entitled, Why I Let My 9-Year-Old Ride the Subway Alone. Lenore, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Lianne. I'm happy to be here.
And let's start with that 9-year-old. How is he doing these days?
Oh, I just got off the phone with him. First of all, he's 22. He's about to take his truck driving license test. So you never know where your kids are going to go, but I can tell you for sure that he was interested in taking the subway. Now he's interested in trucks. There's been a wheel involved in the things that interest him along the way.
And so back then it was just a furor over that blog. And when we spoke to you, we're talking about the hysteria of the world that we lived in. We're talking 9 years ago. Where are we on that hysteria Richter scale, let's call it?
Hysterictor, right? There should be a word for that, the hysteriometer. I'd say we're pinging, probably at 11, maybe 12 at this point. I wouldn't say that our fears for our kids have gone down noticeably in those years, although I do think that COVID has provided a strange pause and re-envisioning of our kids in that they've had so much free time for the last, 6 months or so, that a lot of parents who had their kids doing things pretty much all day in some kind of structured, supervised setting, just because that's what parents do. You have your kid go to school, and then after school, if you're working or if you want them to have a class, they're in some coached session or some class or some sport, and then they come home, and then you have to read the reading log with them and fill in all these things and make sure they're doing their homework. So when all that disappeared and was replaced with just this giant swath of free time, which no parent could supervise the entire time because we're talking 24 hours a day, I think parents started seeing their kids in a new way. And in some sense, it was liberating for everybody. I mean, I think the kids became actually kind of quirky during this free time because they started figuring out their interests because they were so bored and there was no school and no soccer, no Kumon, no karate. And we did a survey. Let Grow actually surveyed 1,600 parents and 1,600 kids across the United States and across the economic spectrum. And most of the parents were saying that, like when we gave them a list of adjectives, good ones and bad ones, dismayed, excited, despairing, angry, whatever, excuse me. The number one thing that parents said was they were, God, what was it? They were impressed. And then number 2 was that they were grateful. And number 3 was that they were surprised in a good way. And all 5 of the good adjectives were above the 5 of the bad adjectives. And we had given them randomly. So it wasn't like they were just checking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 like we had done. And I think that they were impressed because, first of all, a lot of them said that their kids were helping out more around the house than they had done, which you can understand because now, first of all, some parents told me that they had time to teach their kids. This is how you do it. Sometimes there's a famous, an old story of a man who is sawing down a tree and it's taking forever and it's like he's sweating and he's groaning and somebody comes by and says, oh my God, what a dull saw. Why don't you just, sharpen your saw and it'll be so much faster and easier. And the guy says, I can't take time to sharpen my saw. I got to chop down this tree. And that's sort of what parents were like with their kids. It's like, I can't teach them how to vacuum and how to do the dishes and do the laundry. I've got to get all this done because tomorrow I have to get them to school at 7 a.m. And so suddenly the kids were learning. They were learning how to cook. They were learning how to babysit. They were learned how to ride their bikes for sure. But so I feel like as much as the culture had been going towards more and more supervision and more structure of kids and more new things to worry about, when all hell broke loose and all laws were off, all bets were off, parents saw their kids as much more competent and in a way mature than they had been treating them before. So it's the yin yang.
Interesting. So in other words, the pandemic has sort of been beneficial in terms of providing or encouraging more
Recalibrating.
resilience? Yeah,
What do you,
recalibrating in terms of independence and resilience, because those two words, I mean, are in
sure.
the are in our vernacular every single day of the week now, right? Because we're talking about
Yes.
a global pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. So what needs to be done to sustain that, do you think?
Well, that's so interesting. Well, um, in one sense, I think it will automatically sustain itself because once your kid, goes from crawling to standing, you don't say, "Oh, go back to crawling now." It's just you've seen them in a new light. They've seen themselves. They are more independent than they were before, and off they go. So I can't imagine that parents suddenly think their kids can't make their lunches anymore and that we have to go back to doing that, or that they can't even make their own fun. And so that every afternoon has to be filled with an activity. I do think that I don't know how quickly a structure disappears after it's been, put in the attic for however long the pandemic takes. I don't know if right after, there's a vaccine or a cure or whatever, if all the after school sports programs are going to spring up again, and all the travel soccer leagues, and all the, the testing prep or whatever. I do think that between kids liking some of their independence, I mean, I think they miss their friends, but I don't think they miss being in an activity that they had to go to every second, including school. So I think kids are going to have developed so much of an inner life or a separate life from their old, you know, schedule, that I don't think they will go automatic or willingly back to that all. And I think also if they've come up with something that they can do that's free, that's good for parents, and where they can take care of themselves, then I don't think parents will feel as much of a need of sending them off to, some activity every afternoon and something all weekend to keep them occupied if they've learned how to occupy themselves. One thing that Let Grow we're trying to work on is to document all the growth that is going on in kids these days, all the different weird activities that they've started, and all the blossoming that parents have seen, so that we can remind parents of it when the tug of the old starts pulling at them. It's like, wait a minute, don't forget, this is the kid who learned how to decorate cakes. So why don't you let her have, at least a weekend free to pursue some of that.
So it's interesting. When we last spoke 11 or 9 years ago,
Yeah.
social media barely existed, obviously, to the extent it does now, et cetera,
Yeah.
et cetera. What kind of advice could you offer to parents today about how to foster independence in their children?
Vis-a-vis social media, or what is
Well,
the
because
what's the social
a lot of
media hook?
kids, because a lot of kids have this whole other life that you alluded to,
Hmm.
that the parents might know nothing about. But that's, as they get older. But when they're younger, um, like, I don't know, we live in a very different world, and not every
Yeah.
parent is that comfortable still with everything that's out there, allowing their kids to be independent. There's still a very big percentage of people out there that like to helicopter parent for whatever reason. So how do we?
Yeah. Um, I want to unpack one phrase because people think that it's my phrase. People think that I'm the anti-helicopter parent lady. And I really feel like I am anti-helicopter culture that has made us so afraid, or made us, almost forced us to helicopter. I got a letter this morning from a mom of three in South Carolina, where they are going back to school, and she wants her kids to be able to walk home. She lives close enough. She trusts her kids, whatever age they are. She believes that certainly with the oldest, with the other two, they should be walking home. And the school will not let that happen. And the school says she must come, or an adult, an approved adult must come and pick them up. And so here's a mom who does not want to be a helicopter parent, who will look exactly like a helicopter parent if you see her tomorrow, because she has no choice but to come and take her kids, who she feels are perfectly competent in getting home alone, but she has to be with them. So uh, there's a culture out there that is enforcing a certain kind of hovering and supervision that, whether parents want to or not, they find themselves sort of caught up in it. And that's a woman who really is trying to reject that kind of hovering, who was being forced into it by the school or by the school's insurance agency or something. I'm not sure why. But then since we talked, Parents Magazine, the Bible of the parenting world, published my very favorite article ever. Favorite because I think of it as like it's the Rosetta Stone. If somebody's going like, why is this society so wacky at the moment? I can say, well, go read the Parents Magazine Parenting Playbook, no, Playdate Playbook, because you will figure it out from there. And the Playdate Playbook had all these questions from parents that I'm assuming that the reporter had to write, asking, what if this happens? What if that happens? And one of the questions was, if my kid is old enough to stay home alone now, and sometimes she does, or often she does, but now she has a play date over, can I still let them play and run to the dry cleaner now that there's my kid and her friend over? And Parents Magazine said, no, no, no. They didn't say it exactly like that because it's print, but basically it was absolutely not. And they gave two reasons. And first was, what if they get hurt? And the reporter dug up a story of two kids who were making macaroni and cheese in a microwave, and they took it out and it fell on one of them, and she ended up having burns and had to go to the doctor. And then, like, reluctantly, the reporter adds, actually, the mother was home, but in the backyard. So it's like, you're first of all, it's not a mother who left kids at home alone. And secondly, you're saying that mothers shouldn't even be in the backyard because something terrible could be happening, 50 yards from them in the kitchen. And that's already too irresponsible of the mom. But the other thing that the article said was, and what if there's a spat? What if there's a squabble? You want to be able to intervene before anyone's feelings get hurt. And to me, the Rosetta Stone part of that is like what Parents Magazine is telling parents is that you must be hovering so close that, first of all, you're listening in on your kid's entire conversation. Secondly, you're diving in because you don't want them to get angry or frustrated or mad at each other. The assumption being that will be so traumatic that it shouldn't happen to your kid. They'll never recover, or they can't ever figure it out on their own. Only a genius like you, who's 20 years older than them, can figure out how to assuage the feelings and make the play date continue. And so what it is doing is completely undermining any faith that you might have that kids are humans. Of course, they're going to be frustrated and angry sometimes, but we all get over it. And it's probably good to have a little inoculation as you grow up, so that when you're really mad at your boss, you don't need your mom coming over and saying, oh, well, boss, my daughter. So when we talk about this helicopter parenting phenom, I feel like we are fed this template every way and every day. There's all the other parents are standing by their kid at the bus stop. I guess I should too. I can't let my kid walk home because the school won't allow me. I thought I could let my kids play. They're 9 and 10 years old, but no, I'm supposed to be so close that I can listen to each word and make sure and take their emotional temperature. There's items that tell you where your child is at any point. You can read all their emails and texts with different kinds of technology. You can see what their grades are because all these schools have portals that show you exactly how they did on their Spanish quiz 10 minutes ago. And so it's the culture that is telling you that you should be watching everything your kid does, says, eats, reads, watches, licks, hears. And so we are told that if we're not doing that, our kids are in danger. And that is why we are stuck helicoptering, not because our kids are truly in any more danger than we ever were, and not because we even want to. It's just this cultural norm. So Let Grow is trying to change that norm so that we can make it normal again to let our kids have some independence, even like have a play date without us, like the KGB listening in at the wall.
So on that note, what made you decide to start Let Grow, and how do you go about facilitating exactly what you just described, promoting resilience and independence in children?
Wow, these are lovely questions. So for 10 years, as you know, since you talked to me at the very beginning of this, I went around the country and sometimes Canada and sometimes Australia, strangely enough, talking about free range kids and talking about just this. Our culture is forcing, this fear upon us. And then, it didn't seem fair to me. And it didn't even seem good because we all remember our own childhoods. And I think we're mostly grateful for having had a chance to ride our bikes or, make our own lemonade stand without our mom pouring the lemonade for us. And everybody would nod along. Not everybody, but certainly a lot of people would nod along and nothing would change. So a few years ago, Jonathan Haidt, who you might have heard of, he's a psychology professor. Is he a psychology professor or a philosophy professor at New York University? And he's co-author of a book called The Coddling of the American Mind, very popular book. He started to worry about what he was seeing with kids who were of college age. They were anxious. They were easily thrown off their game. They would go to the counseling center if there was a mouse in the room or an argument with the roommate. And then the actual statistics about kids' emotions they were alarming. That kids' anxiety and depression had been going up for about a generation, and he thought, well, it's not like they suddenly get anxious when they get to college. It must be that something is happening when they're younger that is sort of taking away the resilience or the flexibility of kids, so that by the time they are, reaching their late teens, they don't think they can handle things that everybody a generation or two before could. So he came to me and I said, let's start a nonprofit together that tries to sort of overthrow this overprotective culture at younger ages, so that rather than doing this late stage intervention when they get to college, they can arrive on campus or go to jobs, learn how to drive a truck, without having been sort of tamped down so much, almost suffocated with care, that they're a little stunted. So I said, okay, but our goal this time was not to just change minds, because changing minds, as it turns out, doesn't lead to changes in behavior. It's really hard to change behavior. So we decided our goal would be to change behavior, knowing that the minds would follow. Just like if you start exercising, then you become, like, oh, I should be healthier and do stuff. But it's hard to say, like me, I should exercise because I never will. So Let Grow is dedicated to making it easy and normal and giving a little push to parents, to teachers, to society, to letting go, which was originally going to be called Let Go and Let Grow. And we do this we do it through programs and stuff for parents at home. There's all sorts of materials on our website, which is letgrow.org. But through the schools, we offer all these free things. So it's not like I'm, getting a dime for every program we sell. But one of our initiatives in the schools is called the Let Grow Project. And it is extremely simple, so simple that it doesn't really need a name, but we gave it a name. And that is that kids go home with this homework assignment that says, Mom, look, it says I have to do something on my own, and we give them a list. Not that they have to do what's on the list, but it's from kindergarten through 8th grade. So it could be anything: make a sandwich, ride your bike, run an errand, visit your grandma, make dinner for the family, get a job, rake leaves, just all these different things. And the reason we do it through the schools is because if like everybody at the school or everybody in the district gets this homework assignment, all the parents are doing the same thing. We're all letting our kids start walking. Even my kid could walk with your kid. They're going to walk to the playground. They're going to run an errand. So you're not the crazy person. And in fact, your school is telling you to do it. And then it just builds on each other, because it's like, oh, what did you let your kid do? Oh, my kid's doing that. Oh, maybe mine will do that next week. And we've heard from neighborhoods that have done the Let Grow project for their schools. Well, my favorite one is that one kid this was in a small town in Connecticut. One kid went to the local market and he was buying, I don't know what, I'm going to say a muffin. I really don't know. And he had to be under 5th grade or under. So that's it. He was at 10 or younger. And the people at the market were like, what's he doing here? And where's his mom? And why is he alone? And finally, one of the clerks said, what are you doing here? Sorry, he asked the kid. And the kid said, I'm doing my Let Grow project. And they're like, what the heck is that? And he said, oh, for school, I have to do something on my own. I decided to get a muffin. Oh, okay. And after that, when kids started coming to the market, it was normal, right? Oh, it's another Let Grow kid. Okay. Oh, it's a Let Grow kid. So it's so easy to change the norm back to probably what you were growing up with, right? Wouldn't you have run an errand and gotten your own muffin from time to time?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Right. So even though we're in this strange COVID time now where there's, some people are at school and some are half and half and some are all at home, there's also the Let Grow Independence Kit, same place, same idea, different cover letter is basically it, saying now that your child's at home, but it is the same idea. It's just giving parents not only permission, but a push to let their kids do something that probably they were doing at that age. And it just changes the whole culture. We heard from another school, the principal said that she was driving home after a week after the kids had done the Let Grow project. And you can do it once a year, you can do it once a week. It doesn't, you figure out what makes sense for your school or your class. But in this school, they had done it once. And she was driving her home like 2 weeks after the project. I can't remember, it was a week or two, really doesn't matter. The point is that she'd been the principal of that school for 17 years. But on this time, when she went home, she saw 2 kids on bikes, one on roller skates and one on a skateboard. And she said in those 17 years, she had never seen kids outside on their own. And here it was just a little bit later, and the ice was broken. So really, what we're trying to do at Let Grow is break that ice, because it feels great to not be so terrified and not understand how cool your kid can be and how much freedom you can have and how much they can blossom if we just step back. So our slogan now is when adults step back, kids step up. And that's what Let Grow is dedicated to, is just making it normal again, including changing laws that might say that, like, you don't want anybody to be able to say, I saw your kid walking outside and therefore I'm going to call 911 and say you're neglectful. It's like, actually, that's not against the law. So we're trying to make sure that the law is very clear that neglect is real neglect, not letting your kid have some independence, either because you're working 2 jobs and you can't come home every day and they need a latchkey, or because you want them to walk to school because you think it's good.
That's so interesting. And what is the plan in terms of the vision for Let Grow? Where do you want to see this going and how far?
Isn't that interesting? I'm not sometimes I don't think I think big enough. And so I try to. And if in my mind, when I think about how much happier and less anxious kids are after they've done the Let Grow project, and also I'll talk about later the Let Grow Play Club, where we encourage free play before or after school. And the fact that it's all free. So you're talking about something free that's good for kids, that doesn't take class time, that doesn't require any extra equipment or any money spent at all. I started thinking, like, this should be in every school, because we were talking earlier about how kids are getting so anxious and depressed, and even, I don't even want to say it, but even some very bad things that can happen to kids are happening to kids more, that they're doing to themselves. And so if I, it's sort of like, why don't people drink water instead of soda all the time? Now people are drinking water. It's better for them. It's sort of like, why don't we encourage independence that we have really leached out of kids' lives? I was going to read to you this. Can I read you just a few sentences from some kids?
Sure.
So a 7th grade teacher reached out to us last year and said her class, she teaches health, so she gets all 240 kids in the 7th grade. And she said she'd never seen kids as anxious as these. And she was so sad for them and worried for them, because they seemed to have been like, their confidence was missing, but so was almost their gumption. It was like they couldn't even almost express things that they wanted to do on their own because they'd been allowed to do so little. And so she said, okay, come on, fill out this form. And she made a little Xerox for them. What is something that you'd like to do that you've been hesitant to do so far? And these are kids who are 12 and 13 years old. So I'm going to read you a couple of sentences from different kids. I was hesitant to try walking my dog alone because I was scared that he would get loose from the leash or a scary man would take me. Okay, number 2. I was afraid to climb a tree because I was scared I was going to fall and break a bone. 3. I wanted to try doing a wheelie on my bike, but I was scared I might hurt myself. 4. I was afraid to try and cook because there's an open flame and I could get hurt. And the last one that I'm going to read to you, I was hesitant to use a sharp knife as my parents had never let me before.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty telling right there, isn't it?
It's so telling that I feel compelled to read these out loud, because I'm not sure people recognize how dramatic this is. If if I was saying from now, I mean, if I put it in blunt terms, from now on, your children must be locked in the home and given lessons about how endangered they are and how it's World War III out there and how the second they leave, they're going to get hurt. But the second they try doing anything on themselves, try and do anything alone, they're going to get. I mean, look at the catastrophization. It's like the dog is going to get off the leash. That doesn't usually happen, right? I climb a tree, I'm going to break a bone. I do a wheelie, I'm going to hurt myself. I'm going to cook, I'm going to get burnt. I mean, nothing is confident. Yeah. Nothing, it's the opposite of optimism. It's pessimism to the point of catastrophization, right? Yeah. That's a mental health issue. And it's brought about because of this culture where Parents Magazine is saying, don't let your kids argue. And the school is saying, don't let your kids walk home. And the parents are, the busybodies are calling 911 because there's a child alone on a swing at a park. So I'm hoping that independence, like pushing independence, encouraging it, even studying it, is going to become an antidote to the fragility that we're seeing in these kids. And it reminds me, like, for years and years, the culture kept making fancier food until we got Wonder Bread, right? Wonder Bread was great, but it was completely white. We'd taken out all the whole grain, all the chaff, all the chewy kind of crunchy stuff, thinking that this was the best. And it seemed like the best until suddenly the tide turned and said, wait a minute, we threw something out that we should have been putting back in. And so we started putting it back in. And I think that we're going to start putting independence back into, if it has to be, into the curriculum. We're trying to teach kids social emotional learning. They should be confident. They should be caring and compassionate and wise and open-minded. And I think a lot of that comes from negotiating some risks and having some arguments with friends and falling off your bike and having to get home on your own. All these things are building blocks of a successful, resilient person, and we took them out mistakenly, and we got to put them back in.
It's so interesting when you describe it that way. And earlier in your discussion, or you're alluding to the anxiety and the depression and sort of the mental issues that we're seeing, especially among young children. So does that mean that we have to wait for the pendulum to swing all the way over to the point where these mental health issues become so pervasive that now we're forced to do something about it? And are we heading in that direction? Because, mental health issues, to the point that we're discussing them and hearing about them on a daily basis, even 5 years ago, it just didn't happen. So what is the bottom, or like, how furthermore do we have to go for this is really my question, do you think?
Well, it's really interesting because I would hope no further. I mean, the fact that we both are aware of these issues, and, sometimes it seems like maybe it's just we're diagnosing them more. It could be that the needle is more sensitive, or it could be that it's kind of hip to say, oh, I'm so depressed. Actually, it was hip when I was growing up. So maybe now I'm so anxious. But there are actual statistics of hospitalizations for self-harm, and those are going up. And that's not somebody saying, you seem depressed. That's somebody acting on it. And to me, that is a crisis. I don't know how much more of a crisis we want to like, when do we declare a crisis? I'd say, I mean, I hate catastrophizing about anything, and I don't want parents to think it's their fault. And I just feel like if you live in a society that has told kids that everything that they do could hurt them, obviously they're going to grow up sort of scared. And, what is anxiety? I was actually talking to a psychology professor the other day, and he was saying, like with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, or phobias, the idea is that there's something out there that could hurt you, and that you couldn't handle whatever bad thing could happen. So you avoid any kind of situation where you think something will happen that you can't handle. And you're also already assuming no resilience. You're assuming the worst. Like if something, like these kids, if I climb the tree, I'm going to fall. But the assumption is that not only will you fall, you'll break your leg, it will have to be amputated. That's it for you. Gangrene, the end. And so the only the only antidote to that is reality. And so when kids are getting anxious, thinking they can't handle anything, they need a real life experience to show them, haha, surprise, you can. You can handle it. And in real therapy, when there's something called cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the things is exposure. So I'm terrified of spiders. Okay, Lenore, if you saw, I'm actually not terrified anymore now that I'm spending time in a country home. I see them as my friends. But anyway, say you're terrified of spiders. Okay, I'm going to put you in a room with a spider. Now I want you to guess how bad that's going to feel. And I'd say, oh, it's going to be, on a scale of 100, 0 to 100, it's going to be a 95. Okay. And then they put me in a room and the spider's in the corner and I come out and they say, how bad was it? I say, oh, well, actually it was a 20, it's all the way over there. We couldn't move very fast. And so when the reality doesn't jibe with the mental image, reality wins. And also by being sort of forced to look at like how scared I was versus actually I wasn't that scared, it gives me this great boost, right? Hey, I'm stronger than I thought. And so giving kids the experience of doing even these things that they're talking about, using a sharp knife. I keep wanting to make a video of how hard it is to chop off your finger. Really hard to chop off your finger, even with a sharp knife, maybe a cleaver. But like have them walk the dog and it's like, I'm scared it'll get off. Did it get off the leash? No. Did a scary man take you? No. Okay. So we just need to bring a little bit of independent reality back into kids' lives because the parents and the kids are in this double helix of you shouldn't do that. Well, I want to do that. Well, it'll be dangerous. Okay, I won't do that. Well, do you want to do that? No, it's too scary. You just have to break it. And the only thing that breaks it is action, not thinking about it, action. And so if the schools are saying, you better come in on Monday having done something independently over the weekend, it just works.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. Of all the things that you have seen, done, written, oh my led in the time that you wrote that article in 2008, what are you most proud of and what gives you the most hope in terms of progress and where we're moving?
You're asking questions nobody asks. So interesting. I mean, I did a podcast earlier today. Wasn't so most proud of? Well, I can say my silly answer and then my deeper answer. My silly answer is that, and actually sort of has to do with something deeper too. My silly answer is that I always, as a kid, even I wanted to start a fad or a phrase. I actually wore buttons around school with different phrases. I made jewelry, hats. I desperately like, how do you start a phrase? And I don't think you start it by wearing a little button, as it turns out. Nor do you start a craze for terrarium necklaces, something else I was trying to get off the ground. Anyways, I've started a phrase. So I think that's cool. I mean, free range kids is neat. It's in the dictionary and I trademarked it. So whatever. So that's the sort of silly vain thing. The thing that I am excited about is it's what we're just talking about now, and it hasn't actually happened yet. But I think that independence is going to be a therapy. I think it's something that people just haven't noticed. I almost didn't notice it as a therapy. I just thought it's something good for kids. But the more I talk to psychologists, and I wrote Free Range Kids back in 2008 or 9 or something, and now I'm doing a new edition. So I'm putting on a chapter about anxiety. And so I've been talking to a lot of shrinks, and the evidence that this changes kids is becoming, it's becoming clear to me, but it hasn't been studied a lot. So I'm desperately hoping that graduate students across America will start looking, doing double-blind tests to see the actual impact of this. Because in this particular 7th grade class, where I was just reading you the I was scared statements from, the teacher the next year, Jody, sent me a screen grab, which was that this one boy who's now in 8th grade wrote to her and said, thanks to her, she's an inspiring teacher, and she kept saying, kids, you got to get out of your comfort zone. That was her big phrase. So between Jody and doing 20 Let Grow projects in the year, because she made them do 20, he said, I'm off my anti-anxiety meds. So wouldn't it be cool if there was a free, easy, fun way to make that happen? I mean, I guess I can't be proud of it yet, but I'm excited about it.
Well, you certainly have laid the foundation and you're well on your way. And the sky really is the limit when you consider that that column that you wrote,
I
probably
know.
very innocently, all those years
Yeah,
ago.
it's so weird. That is the weirdest thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's amazing. One final question, and this is kind of a deep one, but it really kind of,
Another one. Oh my God, you're
well,
throwing, really all my easy answers are
well,
like
yeah.
on this sheet of paper over here, and you're not asking me them.
But you're on the front lines of something that I just think is an epidemic in society, right? Is the idea of this independence and the lack thereof in terms of how some people are raising their children.
Not just
How do
them. Not do I do. It still sounds like we're talking about these bad parents, these
Oh, no,
crazy
no, no,
parents.
no, no, no.
Yeah,
But you know what I
yeah,
mean. I'm
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
trying to
yeah.
summarize it. But I guess part of my observation has been is a lot of parents don't know that they need help. As a young parent, you're just trying to feed them and clothe them and change them and da da da. When ideally should a parent be given this kind of exposure to this kind of information on how to continue to foster independence in their children? And before you answer, I did speak to a child psychologist who's an international expert on bullying a
Ooh.
short time ago. And she
Hmm.
said, when you think about it, every single thing we do as parents is to prepare our children for independence. Every single thing we do from the time that they're born. You feed them, you give
Hmm.
them solids, then you want to teach them how to eat, but on their own. Teach, all these
Yeah.
different things that go on. Yet there's some part of all of us that is against that when they get to a certain age or stage, or I don't even know what it is. So how do parents know that they need this kind of information, and when do they ideally need it?
That's interesting. Um, so it almost feels like they don't need this information. They need a lack of the other. They need the. They need to know that, like when Parents Magazine is saying, worry about every spat that your kid has with her friend, that's propaganda. They need to recognize that, like when a company is trying to sell you baby knee pads, when we all know that children crawl and they seem to survive it without, lacerating their knees to such an extent that they, are crippled, that's the marketplace. They need to know that when magazines are saying all the dangers in your home, did you realize that, this cup is doing horrible things to your kid? They need to, I'd say that more than information, they need a little recalibration, like we were talking about earlier, to like go like, wait a minute, is somebody trying to sell me something? Somebody trying to scare me? Didn't I do that when I was a kid and I really liked it? Didn't my mom trust me to do that when I was that age? It's just a little bit of divorce from, you just have to almost be a cultural critic in your own life and going like, why am I being sold this temperature change, color changing spoon to feed my child when I know when the food is hot. I can feel it. I can taste it. So who's doing this to me? Obviously somebody's trying to sell something, and I don't blame people for trying to make a buck, but just maybe just try to make a comparison between what you remember doing as a kid and that you appreciated, and what you're being told you can't do with your own kid. And I don't think there's a particular age or stage. I think it's um, recognize that there's this tsunami of information and books and products coming at you that didn't exist a generation or two ago, and somehow you made it to adulthood, and your parents made it to adulthood, and your grandparents made it to adulthood. So just a little bit of, I wouldn't call it cynicism. I'd call it, show me, show me that I really need a temperature changing spoon. Really. I mean, a color changing spoon for the temperature of the food. Really? I don't know. So I'd say, I'm on the side of parents because this information is coming at them from every side. And I don't want to sound like there is a particular way to raise your kids that will make them perfect or not perfect, or, turn them into a sculptor versus a car mechanic. I don't have any of that information. Wish I did, but I don't. All I have is a knowledge that there's a cultural imperative that says that there's a huge risk to everything that you let your kids do independently, and somehow zero risk to hovering all the time. And I'd say be skeptical of that message. There's no such thing as zero risk, and there's no such thing as like letting your kid walk to school is risky, but driving them isn't. No, both of them are really safe. Neither of them is perfectly safe. So try to resist the lure of safe or sorry. It's not just safe or sorry. There's a big swath in between, and you can live there.
Wow, that is incredibly insightful, and tons of perspective and food for thought. Lenore Skenazy, thank you so much, and thank you for all the work you do, because it is very necessary. You clearly remain as passionate as ever about it.
Yeah, I wonder when I'm going to get bored. It hasn't happened yet.
I don't see that happening. Anyhow,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time today, and all the best with all of your projects.
Oh, thanks, Lianne. Thanks for checking in. It's fun to have somebody who was there at the beginning to talk to again. So thanks.
It's hard to, you know what? It's my pleasure, and it's hard to believe that all this time has gone by. We'll have to make it a regular occurrence for sure.
Right. I'll talk to you in 2032.
Exactly. Thanks so much, Lenore.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.